By Sarah Lynn. They say a wedding is the happiest day of a woman's life. Mine felt like a dream, delicate, golden, unreal. The air was thick with roses and soft laughter. I wore a lace gown that shimmered in the candlelight. I remember the way Daniel looked at me as I walked down the aisle, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. And in that moment, I believed him. God, how I believed him. We danced under strings of fairy lights, toasted champagne with trembling hands, kissed like it was the first time. Everyone told us we were perfect, a match made in heaven. I clung to that like a lifeline. Because deep inside me, something felt off. We'd only dated a year before the proposal. Daniel was charming, successful, warm in public, quiet in private. But I loved him. Or at least, I loved who I thought he was. And after our wedding night, I started noticing things. Small things. He slept with his phone face down and under the pillow. He had sudden business trips with no warning. Sometimes, he'd come home and shower before even kissing me hello. But I told myself not to be that woman. The paranoid one. The insecure one. My mother used to say, "Don't go digging for dirt if you don't want to get dirty." So I didn't. For a while. It was 3 weeks after the wedding when the first real crack appeared. I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed. He was in the shower. It lit up with a message from someone saved as J. Just one word. Soon. I stared at the screen, heart thudding in my chest. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, frozen, every instinct in my body screaming that something wasn't right. But again, I buried it. That night, lying in bed beside him, I whispered, "Daniel, do you feel different now that we're married?" He turned to me slowly. Different how? I don't know. Closer, maybe. Safer. He smiled faintly. Marriage is just paperwork, Sarah. You were mine long before the vows. His words chilled me. Not because they were untrue, but because they felt like a claim, not a commitment. I forced a smile and kissed his shoulder. But that night, I didn't sleep. The dreams began soon after. I kept waking up gasping, drenched in sweat. Always the same dream, I was standing in a hallway, endless doors on either side, and one of them was glowing red. I'd walk toward it, hand trembling on the knob, but I never opened it. Until one night, I did. And behind it was Daniel, standing in a room full of mirrors. Every mirror showed a different version of him. One smiling. One crying. One holding another woman's hand. One looking straight at me, expressionless. I woke up screaming. Weeks passed. Daniel grew colder. Distant. He barely looked at me anymore. Our dinners turned silent. The sweet notes he used to leave on the fridge disappeared. Sex became mechanical. Polite. Almost transactional. One night I found a receipt in his coat pocket, a dinner for two at a restaurant I'd never heard of. On a night he told me he was working late. I waited until he left the next morning, then called the place. Reservation for Daniel Westbrook? A pause. Yes, ma'am. He's a regular. Last time he was in with his wife. His wife? I hung up. Heart pounding. Mouth dry. Hands shaking. I wanted to scream. To confront him. To throw something through the window. But I didn't. I needed to know more. Because if this was the truth, the real, ugly truth, I wanted it whole. No shadows. No denial. No room for lies. I started following him. I'd never done something like that before. I felt crazy. But it was like I had stepped out of my own life and into a movie, a slow burn thriller, and I was the heroine chasing the twist. And I found it. One Thursday afternoon, I saw him. Hand in hand with a woman I didn't recognize. Young. Blonde. Laughing. They kissed outside a bookstore. He touched her cheek like I didn't exist. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there, watching my life unravel with terrifying clarity. That night, I laid the wedding photo album in front of me. Page by page. Our first dance. His smile. My tears. Our cake smeared on our cheeks. All lies. A beautiful, choreographed illusion. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened my laptop. Typed his name into a public records site. And what I found made my blood turn to ice. Daniel Westbrook was married once before. 2 years ago. No divorce record. I stared at the screen, blinking, heart pounding. Was he still married? Was I? The phone slipped from my hand. The truth wasn't just betrayal. It was bigamy. And suddenly, everything made sense. The distance. The secrecy. The strange patterns. The gaslighting. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had built a second life, and I was just a piece in his puzzle. I sat there, staring at our wedding rings on the bedside table. Mine shining. His, missing. Of course. He hadn't worn it in days. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just heartbreak. It wasn't just infidelity. It was something darker. Deeper. Dangerous. And I had married a man I didn't know. They say when someone shows you who they are, believe them. I didn't. Not the first time he lied. Not the second. Not even the 100th. Because I didn't want to believe the man I married, the man who held my hand while I cried over my father's death, who kissed my forehead in church, who promised me forever, was a fraud. But now, sitting in the half-lit room, watching his fake life unravel in my browser tabs, I couldn't deny it any longer. Daniel Westbrook wasn't just cheating. He was living 2 lives. And I had only seen the prettier one. I stared at the screen, rereading the same line over and over. Marriage license, Daniel Westbrook and Amelia Cross, issued, May 3, 2021. That was just over a year ago. He married me 7 months later. The man I loved was already someone else's husband. My heart didn't shatter. It froze. I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I was stunned. Cold. Like my soul had stepped out of my body, hovered above me, and whispered, "This is not your life. This is a nightmare." When Daniel came home that night, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront him immediately. I needed answers. Not rehearsed explanations. The truth. So I played along. He kissed my cheek. I smiled. He asked about dinner. I said I was ordering in. He went to shower. I opened his briefcase. Inside, his laptop, a blue folder, and a phone. A second phone. Burner. I stared at it like it might explode in my hand. I opened it. The lock screen was a photo, not of us, of course, but of him and a woman. Amelia, I assumed. She was laughing. Her hand rested on his chest. He looked happy. Not the performative, posed happiness I saw in our wedding photos, but something softer. Realer. And that almost hurt more than anything. The phone had no lock. He must have been careless. Or arrogant. I went through the texts. Months of them. Trips. Dinner plans. Nicknames. Inside jokes. A goddamn dog they adopted together. He lived with her 3 days a week, told her he traveled for work. With me, he claimed the same, reverse lies. A mirrored web of deception. He had 2 homes, 2 toothbrushes, 2 versions of himself. And I had only ever known the shadow of the man. I took screenshots. Sent them to my email. I made copies of his IDs. His passport. The marriage license I had found online. Then I closed everything. And waited. He came out of the shower, towel around his waist, humming. Like he wasn't a monster. Like he wasn't a ghost living in someone else's skin. Long day, he said. Client pitch fell through. I almost laughed. The irony. Oh, I replied, casually. That's too bad. You hungry? He nodded. Starving. And we ate together like strangers playing husband and wife. But the moment he fell asleep, I packed a small bag. Laptop. clothes, documents. I didn't cry. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out. And I didn't look back. I stayed with my sister for 2 days. Didn't tell her everything. Just said I needed space. She let me be. Gave me tea. Blankets. Silence. I filed for annulment quietly, then reached out to a lawyer about bigamy charges. It was slow, painful. But it felt like motion. And then, I did something reckless. I messaged her. Amelia. Just one line. You don't know me. But I'm Daniel's other wife. Her reply came an hour later. What the hell are you talking about? So I sent her the marriage license. The texts. Photos. Everything. And then I turned off my phone. She called me the next day. Her voice was hollow. Wounded. I had no idea, she said. I swear to God. He told me he was traveling for work every week. I believed her. Because I had been her. She met me at a diner 2 towns over. We sat across from each other, 2 women with the same scar. She was kind. Soft-spoken. A teacher. And completely shattered. He told me he wanted to start a family, she whispered, tears in her eyes. I was going to surprise him next week. I'm pregnant. My stomach twisted. And for the first time, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Not for Daniel. But for her. For us. We talked for 2 hours. Traded timelines. Realized just how deep his lies went. And by the end of it, we weren't just victims. We were witnesses. Survivors. And maybe, just maybe, allies. The next day, Amelia moved out of his apartment. Daniel called me that night. 14 times. I didn't answer. Then he emailed me. Sarah, I don't know what you think you found, but this is all a misunderstanding. Please talk to me. Please. I love you. Love? I almost screamed. But instead, I replied with a single photo. His 2 wedding rings side by side. No words. Just the evidence. And then, silence. The investigation began a week later. I cooperated. So did Amelia. Turns out, we weren't the only ones. A 3rd woman stepped forward. Then a 4th. Daniel had built an entire house of cards, carefully, arrogantly, piece by piece. But now, it was collapsing. And he had no idea who he really was anymore. I moved back into my apartment, alone. Painted the bedroom walls. Donated the wedding dress. Burned the photos. And every time the grief tried to pull me under, I reminded myself. This wasn't my fault. I didn't fail. I was lied to. Used. Gaslit. But I survived. There's a kind of quiet power in choosing yourself again. Not out of spite. But out of mercy. And I wasn't done reclaiming my life. Time didn't heal everything. But it softened the edges. In the weeks following the investigation, I often caught myself walking through the apartment in silence, trying to feel like I belonged in my own life again. It wasn't easy. Everything reminded me of him. The wine glass he used. The chair he read in. The balcony we once slow danced on under string lights like fools in a fairy tale. But slowly, day by day, I took my world back. I stopped wearing my ring. I deleted every photo. I changed the locks. And I started therapy. That first session, I sat on the edge of a couch and whispered. I don't know who I am anymore. The therapist didn't flinch. She just nodded. Good, she said. Then we get to find her. And so we did. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But piece by piece. I started journaling, pages of rage and sorrow and disbelief. Then came reflection. Then, strength. I wrote letters I never sent. To Daniel. To Amelia. To myself. One night, I read one of those letters out loud. You thought you broke me. But all you did was set me free. You never loved me, you loved my trust, my loyalty, my belief in you. But you never deserved any of it. I burned that letter in the sink. Watched the edges curl and blacken. And I didn't cry. The legal process was slow. Messy. Daniel pled not guilty to bigamy, of course. His lawyer tried to paint us, the women, as confused, dramatic, even unstable. But the evidence was overwhelming. And eventually, he caved. He took a plea deal. No jail time, but fines, probation, and his reputation shattered. He lost his job. His licenses. His name. I should have felt vindicated. But honestly, I just felt empty. Because no punishment could return what I had lost. Amelia and I stayed in touch. She gave birth to a baby girl in early spring. I visited her in the hospital. Held the child in my arms. She didn't have Daniel's name. And somehow, that mattered more than anything. Do you hate him? Amelia asked one day as we walked through the park, the baby sleeping on her chest. I thought about it. Hate? I said. No. I don't think so. I think I feel nothing. And that's the most powerful thing I've ever felt. She smiled softly. I wish I were there. You'll get there, I said. Takes time. I started painting again. It was something I hadn't done in years. Daniel always said art was a waste of time unless it sold. Now I painted for no one but me. Abstract shapes. Harsh lines. Soft colors. And slowly, the canvas started looking like healing. One morning, nearly a year after it all began, I woke up and didn't think of him. Not first thing. Not for hours. And when I did, it was just a memory. A distant scar on the map of my life. Not a wound. Not an ache. Just something that had been. I started dating again. Cautiously. Not to replace what I lost, but to rediscover what I liked. Who I was. What I needed. And I learned. I no longer needed someone to complete me. I was whole. Fractured once, yes. But stronger in the places where I had been broken. Sometimes, people ask if I regret marrying him. I don't. Because that chapter taught me everything I didn't know I needed to learn. About deception. About survival. But most importantly, about myself. I look in the mirror now and see someone new. Someone wiser. Softer in some ways. Sharper in others. Someone who walks away from red flags, not dances with them. Someone who listens to the small voice in her chest, the one that whispered something is wrong, and trusts it. And if you're listening to this story, whoever you are, maybe you've been betrayed. Maybe your trust has been shattered. Maybe you feel like you're drowning in someone else's lies. Let me tell you something. You're not weak. You're not stupid. And you're not alone. Pain isn't the end. It's the doorway. And walking through it may just bring you back to yourself, stronger, clearer, and more unbreakable than ever.